Hi everyone. Take two. Not take two, I'll rephrase that. Video number 2. I'll turn this on. And yeah, I need to do some more alchemizing. I'm so grateful for my guitar. So grateful. For anybody who's not familiar with me, my name is Ernestine Day, and I am the Soulful Guitarist, and I channel energy from soul, source, through me, through my guitar without using words. Yeah. So, let's see where we go now. Plug in my wireless gizmo. Here we go. I forgot to make my Facebook page public. My apologies. There we go. On the other side. Where we go now? Okay. Let's see where we go. Wow, that was unique energy. Just give me a sec. Temperamental. Wooden and string instruments. Okay. I think I know where we're going. Let's see. Well, that was a bit of a godsmacker. It's like, wow. I got my beautiful sister here, Jen. She's heard me, well, you've been hanging around with me, what, 6, 8 months, maybe longer? And she can attest the fact is that it's always magical because it's about being present and allow this energy to move in and through me the way it does. And I'm so grateful for my guitar because she allows me to speak more than I'm able to speak here. But she allows me to express from my heart and soul, which is me. Which is I am. Yeah, that energy is called Ozark. If you know Pamela, um, oh, what's her last name? It just went, but anyway, her first name is Pamela. I think she also goes by the name Mia. And anyway, a year and a half ago, I channeled her energy. Now, again, going back, the fact is how it wants to be expressed in the moment. So that was pretty cool, actually. And I'm so grateful, like I said before, that some energies I remember, some I don't. And if I'm tapping into somebody's energy, not necessarily all the time, but, you know, I have a few songs that are channeled from other people. Meaning, when I say that, I'll clarify that, I tap into their energy, not consciously, just tap into it, and I start channeling this incredible music that comes in and through me. And that's where I ended up with Pamela's energy with Ozark. And it's the same thing with Kate Lumley. Her song is called Delightful, because that's Kate. And if you know Kate, you'll understand. And I don't know how many people I've channeled. There's quite a few, and some energies have come and gone, and which can happen when there's a disconnect with two energies. That just came to me. I just realized that in this very moment. But I still have it. It's just I've got to bring it back up. That's all. So, you guys, on that lovely note, thank you for holding space for me as I alchemize some energies. Muchly appreciate it. Yeah. And personally, Jen knows the story behind this as I'm going to make this comment. I cannot wait until August 9th to show these people just how fucking amazing I am at what I do. But it's also who I am. And I refuse to allow anybody to pull me back down. I'm done with that. And August 9th, I think it was last week or the week before, in the last couple of weeks, put it that way, somebody made a comment that when I was sharing the story, because it was pretty raw when I was sharing, it subsided now, not gone, subsided. And because I'm still sorting through stuff, but she goes, they're going to eat their words. I went, yeah, true. They are. And it's quite interesting with people's dynamics. I'm not control what other people do. I'm only in control of myself. And what I'm finding with this experience that I'm having, I'm observing it and not in it, if that makes sense to you. I'm sorry. That's so true, Jen. I got to put this up, Jen. That's priceless, and that's why I'm chuckling. Because, right? Is that lady's spiritual awakening? It's true. That's what's going to happen. I know that, but it's not my intentions. Right? Because I'm getting the very, very distinct, even with the event today, you know, and you know, when I say this, I'm so grateful for the people who have seen me, appreciate what I do, appreciate who I am, value me as I am, because that's what I hold on to. When you have people who are their ego interferes with them and their ability to take responsibility for their own behavior, their own conduct, what they say. And all I can say, I got shunned today by 4 people at a very small gathering. I got shunned by older women like me. I know it doesn't speak of me, it speaks of them. And it's like anything, you guys, we need to be conscientious and aware of the fact is, what somebody is going through, do not get involved and, saying who's right, who's wrong. For me, is this person was rude, disrespectful to me and my music by saying, we'll find you a room. If they want to listen to you, they can go in there and hear you. It was absolutely rude. And it's a typical narcissist where they don't want to take responsibility, for what they said. I don't know if she's ever going to be able to or capable of. That's not my job. But my job and my responsibility is me, myself, and I. And how I handle it and move through it. That's my job. That's my responsibility. But at the same time, the word but, to have other people get involved where they weren't there, I'm not asking you to agree or disagree with either or side. But if if you sat there and said to them, if somebody was rude to you, what would you do? Well, exactly. Because I spoke up and said, this is not okay. I'm a professional musician and I deserve the utmost respect and regard. And that person doesn't see me as that, but I don't need that person to see me as that. But how dare anybody take their personal, whatever their opinions are, because they've not experienced me, other than their idea of who they think I am. That's up here. But on the heart, soul level, right, I know. Just talking about how we, how some people operate and they don't take responsibility for their own behavior, conduct, what they say, and that how they operate in the ego part up here in the brain, and then they twist everything to being something that it's not. And it's like that saying, stay in your own lane. If you weren't there, you can't see anything. If I thought I was rude or disrespectful to anybody, no matter where, I would go, oh shit, maybe, because I reflect a lot. And I will go to that person and say, I'm sorry. What I said, how it came out wasn't the way I really want it to come out, or whatever it is. Doesn't matter. But that's my integrity. That's my integrity. And I'm so pleased that I am who I am. I posted earlier today about a black sheep. Like, I don't know how to go along with the game, for the lack of any other word. I don't belong to any group. I don't belong to anybody but myself. And I don't like clicks. I have no time for it. I don't know where you guys are at on that stuff. It's just, no. Treat me civilly and respectfully. I'll treat you the same. If you're rude and disrespectful to me, I will let you know. But then I'm done. That means energetically wise. Then it's my job to let go of all that. But at least I spoke up. Spoke truth. Not what I think it is, but what it is. I'm so grateful for my own willingness, my heart and soul's desire to stay true to myself and not lower myself for the sake of somebody saying hi to me or anything else. Yeah. But anyway, on that note, everybody, I'm going to say good night, God bless, hugs and loves, and I'll see you guys the next time I'm on here. Okay, ciao.